Hello and happy Memorial Day. I am Reverend Jamisen, aka Rev G, and welcome to Conversations with Rev G. I'm here every Monday night on WEMS Radio from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. You can find me on Facebook and on YouTube and the WEMS app at this time. And I bring on special guests and we talk about spirituality and we talk about how spirituality has been a part of their lives, how spirituality has supported them in the many things that they've done in their lives. My guests, they come from all different backgrounds and they have all different perspectives. So it gets pretty interesting here. And my goal is to talk about spirituality from a practical perspective, create a space where you can talk about spirituality from what it means to you. How can it support you in your everyday life? And there's a difference between how we talk about religion and spirituality because there are so many religions and you could be any religion and still use spirituality as a practice and a part of your daily life. So we talk about moving from religion to spirituality and the practices that we keep. And my goal is to support you in finding joy and living your best life with grace and ease. You can find me every day on Facebook with inspirational quotes. And I'm also on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. Tonight, I have a very special guest, Quinn Jamisen. Quinn is a special services leader. She's a teacher, an officiant, and Quinn is the funniest one in the fun group. So I'm excited to have her here tonight to share with you some of the things that she's doing and her spiritual journey. Welcome, Quinn.
Hello, Reverend G.
Hey, how are you today?
I'm doing quite well. It's a lovely day, a lovely Memorial Day.
Yeah, I know. I was saying how it rained for 2 days here, right? I was talking to prophets in Atlanta, and I was like, "What? It's been like we had to put our coats on." Right?
Yes, it's been quite interesting, this weather. I was in Chicago a few days ago, and it was also freezing cold and raining. Very different than what it had been.
Yeah. So, Quinn, introduce yourself to everyone.
So my name is Quinn, and I think Grenetta shared it best. I'm currently a special services leader at a middle school. Before that, I was in the classroom for about 8 years in the high school environment. I became an officiant shortly before COVID hit, and I do like to think of myself as the funniest one in the friend group. I mean, I know that's subjective, but
Right. That's pretty good. Yeah, I know that you had like teaching experience and currently you're like the teacher's coach. Can you talk about how you got to that point? And I know you specifically deal with students with learning disabilities. So give us some background on how you got there and what's the impact that you're seeing today with COVID and just some of the support systems that are available?
Sure. So my journey into education was before becoming a special services leader. That was a journey in and of itself. I started off in finance, and that was my intended career path. But I spent a lot of time doing volunteer work. Specifically volunteering in juvenile court in New Jersey, where I'm from. Shout out to Jersey. And at that time, I saw a great disparity between the services that more affluent white children were getting versus what was happening with Black and brown kids who were coming in displaying, some behavioral issues in school. And the more I listened to these stories of these Black and brown kids, a lot of them who did have diagnosed disabilities, it became clear to me that the learning environment was the bigger issue. It was the thing that was causing some of these behaviors, but instead of them receiving access to services, it was punitive measures. You know, how could we punish these kids into behaving? And it didn't sit right with my spirit. And you know, I never ever thought I'd become a teacher, but it felt like the way that I could have the biggest impact would be on the educational side of things. And so I shared with some friends that I was looking into going to grad school for teaching. And one of my best friends, Elena, she recommended the teaching fellows. And when she recommended it, there were only a few days left to apply. So I put together all my materials, I applied, and I was accepted. And that's how my journey as a teacher began. And I have no desire to be a principal. I'll state that openly right now. And I never really thought about a leadership role, but at some point you realize, even if you are a good teacher, your impact is limited in one classroom. And as much as it hurt my soul to give up being in the classroom, because I'll always consider myself a teacher, no matter what role I ever have. But leaving the classroom and moving into a role where I got to support teachers' development and making sure that our students got what they needed, it felt like the right step to make. And so that's where I am now, coaching learning specialists on how to best serve our exceptional learners, and also trying to have an impact with just all of the teachers and staff in our building.
Yeah, that's interesting because I met a lawyer that actually advocates for parents. She supports the parents of the kids who have learning disability or exceptional kids, right? And it's interesting when you talked about the disparities for the brown and Black children. There's so many services out there that they don't even know even exist, right? There's so many opportunities that are missed in our community. So it's really good when we can say, let's look at how do we bring these services to our community. So I commend you for being in that role. What have been some of the challenges for you in doing that?
Oh my goodness. I'd say one of the biggest things that I think any educator grapples with, whatever school you're at, you're not always going to agree 100% with their practices. And there's this fine line you walk between doing what you're supposed to do as a representative for your school and giving parents or guardians the real deal hard truth if there's something that their student isn't receiving. As much as I value my relationships in any building I work in, I see myself as a servant for children and families first. And so anytime there's something happening that isn't in the best interest of students, I will always share that with families and try to advise them on how they can get the best services for their students. And that can be challenging, but at the end of the day, when I look at myself in the mirror before I go to bed at night, I have to have a clear conscience that I did the best thing for kids.
So I talked about some of the challenges, but can you talk about also some of the successes that you've had?
Oh goodness, you're gonna get me to tearing up over here. I'd say At one of the high schools that I worked at, I began with a certain group of kids when they were freshmen. And when I made my move into becoming a special services leader, I wouldn't leave until they graduated. So their graduation year was the year that I left. And just the relationships that you get to build with kids when you're with them year after year, the relationships you build with families, and they become like your family. They're truly partners in this work, and seeing kids struggle, building that relationship, getting to a place where they feel comfortable with you and they'll come to you and share really vulnerably, which is hard for us as adults to share openly. But when a child can come to you and share really openly about what they're struggling with, whether it's in school or out of school, and you're able to support them and be a bridge sometimes between them and their parent or guardian and the school, and getting to watch them walk across that stage, kids who didn't believe that they would be able to do it, and seeing them, walk across the stage or sitting in the office when their college acceptances come in. And you just think about all of the trials and tribulations and all the times that their faith was tested, your faith was tested, but to get to see them, take that next step and to know that you got to be a part of it is just, I don't think there's anything more rewarding that I have ever experienced in my life.
Yeah, I get that. It's interesting because my ninth grade math teacher, I just got in touch with, right? After all of these years, right? And I've just been so, I don't even know how I've been feeling, but excited because she really impacted my life, right? And to think after all these years, I'm just keep thinking about her. I don't even know if I do what to do next, but I just have like all these memories, and I just would like to say how much she impacted my life. So I look forward to that conversation of sharing. And I remember, we did Momentum together, and a lot of people here are Momentum, right? It's a transformational training. And one of the things was to write a letter to somebody who has impacted your life. I'm not in momentum right now, but I want to write that letter, right?
Yes, please do. We all have that person. Mine was my 8th grade English teacher, Zoe Gonzalez. I don't know where she is currently, but she made a tremendous impact on my life and just how I saw myself as a learner and like the belief I had in myself. So yeah, write that letter. If I ever find her, I will thank her.
Letter, yeah. And so I'm sure though the kids feel the same way about you, it'll be the same impact later for them, the way that you were a part of their lives. And being a part of teaching them and their family, and being able to balance, getting them to learn and to move forward, and the challenges that they have. So that's really commendable, I would say, to be able to, and I know the feeling of seeing them walk across that stage was just a beautiful thing. With COVID, well, what are going to be some of the challenges that you can foresee? Schools going back full time?
Yeah, so many. Just this past year and change has been so hard for everyone. And lots of our families have parents or guardians who are frontline workers. And so kids are online trying to learn, and carrying that weight of knowing, whenever their parent goes out to work, they could come home and be sick. We have lots of kids who live in multi-generational households. So it's like, it's not even parents just worrying about getting their kids sick. It's, you have grandma or grandpa in the house and worrying about that. And I think one thing that people don't always understand, and I think schools don't always do a great job of explaining, is that when we go back, it's not going to be the same, you know, and a lot of families who hope, my school stayed remote throughout the school year, and a lot of our families and kids who were excited about returning, like, understood in theory, like, we'd have to socially distance and all of that. But, like, working at a middle school, you have kids who are going to be so excited to see their friends, who are going to, like, run around and want to, like, hug and kiss and, you know, laugh and play, and we can't have that happen. And so I think a huge concern of mine is when we think about discipline, and I hate that word, but doing what we need to do to make sure that our kids and staff remain safe, but knowing that kids are going to be kids and they're going to want to, you know, have fun and play and do all the things that they're used to doing. And they've already been through so much. You don't want to further traumatize them when they come back to this environment that they've been so excited to return to. And so a lot of the things I've been thinking about are ways in which we're going to help our kids understand the importance of following all of these new rules. And, you know, how do you do that with a fifth grader? They're babies, you know, and trying to practice compassion and empathy when they aren't able to do the things that we know we need them to do. And I also think about teachers. This is going to be a really new and different experience for teachers. And a huge part of being a teacher is remaining emotionally constant. You know, we have feelings, we get triggered, we get upset, but you can't put that on kids. And knowing that this is probably going to be the most difficult year, more difficult than this, like, virtual learning. We're doing something totally different. Knowing how stressful that is going to be and trying to support teachers through it, but also being really, really clear that we are here for the kids and we need to manage our emotions because it is not their responsibility to support us. We are there to support them.
You know, what comes to mind for me too is the trauma and stress that the kids have been through, what mental health services and support, because you don't necessarily go to school thinking kids need mental health services support. But here, I think, given the way this past year has been and bringing them all back, that probably should be up. Do you see any plans for those kind of things happening? Probably in your school, because you're in a private school?
I'm at a charter. So I think almost any teacher you ask, whether they're in a traditional public school, private school, charter, social emotional learning is not something that we prioritize enough for our kids. And so I think we do really feel called to put that at the forefront for when kids return. And unfortunately, when you think about the limited resources that schools have, you know, we have one social worker in our building. And as a charter network, something that people don't always know is all of our related services, so like speech, occupational therapy, counseling, we have to outsource to people. So we'll have one person who is in the building who's a part of our network, and then we have to try to find other folks to supplement that. And when I think about the emotional needs that kids are going to have when they return, it's definitely going to be more than one person can handle, and probably more than the two people that we currently have. So how do you ensure that you have enough people and enough people with experience and the best intentions of kids in place to support them? And how do you support parents who maybe don't believe in counseling or don't understand the role that it can play? How do you support parents in navigating that so that they can make the best decisions for what support their kids receive?
And something just came to mind too, how teachers now have to be in a whole different role at this point, right? So there's a shift in everything. So it will be interesting to see how it goes, how this year goes, and what support services will be needed, right? For everybody, the
For
parents.
everyone. Yeah, if I could wave a magic wand,
Right.
there would be a social worker in the building just for teachers.
Right.
Because we're going to need that support too.
Exactly. So that will be the way. So we're all just like, hoping and praying that it all goes well, but we have to get in it and see how it goes. And when you talk about the little kids, yeah, they don't know, right? Those are going to be the most challenging ones. And then even if you think about the older kids who want to be more rebellious and want to live their lives. So there'll be a lot of different perspectives. So I'm hoping that there will be support, for that, right? So let's shift and start a little bit and talk about your spiritual journey.
That has been a journey as well. Yeah. So I was raised in a religious household. My father's father was a minister. Both of my parents from the South, like Southern Baptists, and so religion played a huge role in my life growing up. I went to Catholic high school, and so religion just was just a huge facet of life in a way that I never got to choose it. It was just something that was like, this is what you are supposed to believe, and this is what we do. And it wasn't until I'd say college or shortly after that I started thinking about what I actually believed. And there's a lot of conflict that comes there.
Right.
Because I never wanted to feel like I was disrespecting my family or the beliefs that they held or the time and effort they had put into teaching me these things. But it was really difficult. And I don't consider myself religious per se right now. I do believe that the universe is always conspiring in our favor. I don't know what that force is. But I believe in something larger than myself. I just don't quite know what that is. And I think something that I learned, I guess something that I kind of believed but didn't really know was a thing, and something that came up when we were doing Momentum was people talking about spirituality. And I think I always had this warped view of spirituality and had it very much tied to religion. And I didn't realize you can be a spiritual person without being religious. And like spirituality looks different for everyone. And that's when I really started thinking about the things that sustain me, that I may not have necessarily thought of as spiritual practices, but they really are for me.
Yeah, it is interesting when you finally understand that religion does not have to be tied to spirituality, but that's what we were taught. Jesus Christ was what is, right? And if that's what you were taught, we moved and we lived from that perspective. And it takes a lot to break all of that. Unless you learn something different, you have to replace it with something. You can't just say, oh, I reject that, right? And then not have anything to replace it with. So spirituality is a way of finding that connection to God, spirit, the universe, whatever you want to call it, right? But there is that higher being. And how do you connect to it? And what spiritual practices are the things that support you in connecting to it? And the things that support you when whatever's going on in your life, right? If you are feeling stressed out, what do? Right? What practices, spiritual practices can help you do that? I talk about a spiritual toolkit, which is like the things that you have, they in your pocket that you use, right? And the spiritual toolkit, those practices, you can have a lot of them, but what I've learned lately is about consistency. consistency is the key to getting to our end goals. We get, starting and stopping. And if you consistently practice your spiritual practices, you can see how they work in your life. And so there are just so many of them. I like to bring people on and we talk about what some of their spiritual practices are. One of the things that just came to my mind is talking about dating, and we always talk about dating when we get together, right? I was thinking about talking to you about dating, and I was just like, brah, before, during, and after COVID, right? Some of the differences that you've seen, and then we can talk about it too when we talk about our spiritual practices and how spirituality has played any role, if at all, right, in the whole thing. So let's move to there.
Yeah, I will say you need to believe in something if you are single and in New York in this day and age, because you're not gonna make it on your own. I will say, like, honestly, one of the biggest spiritual practices of mine is around like laughter and playfulness. And Anne Lamott, who's an author, said laughter is carbonated holiness. And I love that. And that's something that I lean on, just like being able to let loose and have fun and find the joy in even the worst of moments. And some of those moments came pre-COVID, during COVID, and I'm sure will last after. Yeah, I think anyone who knows me knows I'm usually in a relationship, and that stopped around 2017. And that was the first time at 37 that I was really like free and open to dating, and like really practicing non-judgment and just seeing what was out there for me and who came into my path. And I will say I've had a lot of interesting experiences. I've met people who definitely are not for me romantically, but I've made friends. And that was something that I didn't believe in before. It was like, either we're dating or we're not dating. Like, there's no room for friendship. I have enough friends. But there's some people who I realize, like, I really do connect with you, but it's on a platonic level. And like, we get to enhance each other's lives as friends. And that was something that was great. There's just so many different types of people out there. And I think I'm grateful that when I started really putting myself out there and dating, I was at a place where, like, I know who I am. I know what I need, what is a nice to have. I'm not as rigid as I used to be. And that allowed me to really enjoy a lot of like different people and learn a lot. I still haven't found my person. People have lots of also interesting beliefs when it comes to dating and monogamy, and it was interesting learning about those beliefs. They're not going to be my beliefs. It was nice to have like a little bird's eye view into what some folks are doing. And during COVID, I didn't date. I went on one date, I think, last summer, and it was just incredibly awkward. And you know me, I like to be silly and playful and joking. And I was just so anxious about, COVID that I just couldn't really enjoy myself. But I think like that turned out to be a blessing. I got to know myself a lot better because I wasn't thinking about anyone else. And, now that I'm vaccinated and the world is starting to open up, I'm excited for what's to come.
And so some of the things you've learned now about yourself being in COVID, and COVID gave all of us a chance to pause and to figure out who we are and to figure out what we want. And what I heard you say that was interesting is, when you know what you want, you go into the relationships knowing what you want, right? And then you're not settling. and then you'll know when to go in and when to come out. But I find it interesting that you said that you met a lot of friends, because I was always of the theory that men didn't really want to be your friends, right? Like it was
You
like
know, sometimes you
how
have friends and then you have special friends.
right,
Not me,
no,
Mom. I never had a special friend. I just had regular friends. But I've heard.
you you've heard of special friends and all kind of friends. Yeah, but and when I think about it, you can become friends if both people are willing to be authentic and open with each other. I think what happens is, and in my experience, it's either been one person wanted to be with the other one and the other one didn't, and it couldn't become like we mutually just want to be friends, and that's the part where you would have to be open, authentic, and really be able to be with that person, knowing that you're creating this friendship. It was easier for me to be friends with gay men now. I have gay man friends, right? That lots of them, right? Which was a lot easier than to be friends with straight men. I
Yeah,
don't
you get to be around that energy, like the masculine energy, but you don't have to worry that someone has something in the back of their mind about what they're going to be doing with you. It's like you get to have that authentic friendship. Yes.
exactly, exactly. So, and yeah, and really get into, I was trying to think, do I really have any straight friends, male friends, right? I mean, yeah, I do. Married ones, but you know what I'm saying.
I mean, they're not my best friends, right? Like, they're not the people I'm going to call and kiki with. If I
Right,
get a promotion, they're not going to be the first person I text. It's like,
right.
you know, we're
Right.
friendly. We're not like
Friendly, right.
best. Yeah.
I have a best friend. Mark is a really good friend of mine. Mark Graham,
Oh,
you
my
know.
Graham, such a nice person. He's a good man.
Yeah, he's a good man, and I consider Mark my really, really good friend.
If
You
Mark
know,
has any single Mark Graham-esque friends, please feel free to send them my way.
I know, right? It's like Mark Graham S friends, right? He is, right? Really, really, really is, and it's just interesting. I think the most important part when I think about the whole dating thing and what's going on is to know yourself and be true to who you are and be willing to say, this is what I want in a relationship. Because sometimes we were so afraid to start from the beginning. We start off all false and fake, right? And then get to a point where, man, we should have just been upfront honest. But if sometimes we may not know either. So, what it is that we want. But the whole idea is going into the relationships now, knowing what you want and saying, this is what I want and this is where I am, and having those real conversations.
And
I
my
think
crazy is on full display from date one. And I think my best friend Angelique might be watching this, and she always tells me to like calm myself down and not let the full blown crazy come out on the first date. But I'm like, I'm 40. I need them to see it and decide if they're into it. And if they're not, there doesn't need to be a date too.
exactly. And I think being 40 brings you that clarity too, because as we mature, we get older, we learn more things, we learn more about ourselves. And yeah, I didn't know you were 40 yet. What's that like for you being
Yeah.
40?
I mean, I don't know because I turned 40 in April.
Oh,
So
okay.
like, COVID was still going on, is still
Mhm.
going on. So I feel like I haven't experienced life as a 40-year-old just yet. I've still been, I mean, it doesn't feel too much different. I think the crying voice from like the one egg I have left, it's like, hurry up, find someone.
Why don't you freeze those eggs, right?
Oh, they're
Because
so old and dusty now. I'm like, if I was gonna freeze them, I should have frozen them at
but
like
no, but
25.
so funny. I would say, and this has been my message too, go ahead, freeze those eggs now because you guys have waited a long time it was sort of a generation. The 80s babies are like career people, push career. And now at 38 to 40, you guys are now saying, oh, let's have babies. Get the mags out of there now. Because they just getting older in there. Get them on out right now.
Oh, it's true.
But the interesting thing is that the insurance companies are now paying.
For some of it, yeah, for some of it.
They're paying a lot more, though. Look, they're paying a lot more and making it affordable for people who can't afford it. I mean, if you work, you have insurance. And I would say for middle income people, right? Because it's really expensive to do all the egg freezing and all the whole thing, right? But that support can make it possible. Yeah. And then I did all this research where I saw that some people, there are grants too. People are giving away money to support women in having kids. So it's an interesting concept.
You need to send some of that information over to me. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna send you. I did.
Send me a good man, and if you can't find one of those, send me some grant information.
So Gigi, a good man. All right. But yeah, I mean, and that is a very interesting topic that I think should be discussed openly for you 80s career young women who just pushed there towards the career, and now here you are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And we are, what are they calling you guys? Geriatric parents?
I fall into the Zennial category. I will not call myself a geriatric millennial, no judgment, but please don't put me in the millennial group. That ain't me.
That's not me, right? But it doesn't matter, or millennial, Zennial, all of that. It's really about who you are, who you become. What experiences that you have that you've taken advantage of, and how you want to live your life. And, like you were saying, the laughter and the joy, that's what I'm all about too. It's about bringing that joy. And it's not to say that life doesn't happen and things don't happen, but to laugh and to find joy is really great. So I always talk about.
And I think like a lot of people don't get that. I had a student come up to me once, one of my favorite students of all time. I won't say his name because I don't like to, be biased. But he asked me, he was like, I want to ask you a question. I said, what? And he's like, how are you so happy? He's like, I don't want to say that you're lying, but I just I don't understand it. How are you so happy? And I said, it's a choice. Some days I only have to choose it twice. Some days I have to choose it 147 times. It's not that things don't aggravate me, but I have to either choose to hang on to that thing that is bothering me, or I can choose to find the joy. Whatever that thing is that's bothering you, it's going to be there later today. It'll be there tomorrow. You can figure out a solution, but don't let it take your joy in the moment.
Exactly. Because I always say, how you could get on a negative spiral, one negative thing, and you'll find 15. And I always say, if you creep one gratitude in there, or one bit of joy, then you'll go spiraling back up. But the hardest thing sometimes is when you get all the way in, is to find that one little bit of gratitude, or find that one little bit of thing that'll make you laugh and then bring you back, because it's the same. You can spiral into happiness. You start laughing and your stomach hurts, you're crazy, laugh, right? So it's the same idea. And you could spiral into thinking about all the great things and all the blessings that you have, and that will lift you up. So it's the same energy of being down in the negative field as it is getting to be positive. And I'm positive like you all the time. I find that. Not to say I don't get sad and things happen, but I find the joy most of the time. And that's my goal, to do that, right? And quickly jump out, right? And I mean, because I am accused of not letting people be where they are. So I'll say, okay, I'm gonna wait right over here for you, right?
And I'll see you when you get there.
I'm gonna hold this little spot right over here for you, but I'm not gonna join you over here, right? So, and being able to know how long, what to say and how to, yeah. So it really is interesting balancing having that joy in your life and really bringing it to people. I started doing stand-up comedy,
I
right?
know.
And it was just like I just jump into things and start doing them for fun. So I was like, oh, that looks like fun. Let me do it. And it is a lot of fun. And I had a great time doing it. And I was good at it. And then once I started practicing and writing jokes, I was like, oh, this is really good. So, so the comedy part of me is also a part of like bringing that joy. It's spirituality. The practice of joy is a spiritual practice. And I like what you said about choice. We get to choose, always making the choice, right? Yes, choose happiness. Choice is a happiness. We can choose happiness all the time, right? And and that's one of the things when I talk about grace and ease, right? And pass along. Somebody said pass along the grants for the freezing eggs.
We're fighting each other for the grants.
For the freezing eggs, the grants will come, right? You became a wedding officiant. How did that come up? Because I'm a wedding officiant too, but I became that because I was ordained as an interfaith minister, and along with that, you get to do weddings. So I've done a few weddings. It's interesting and really good.
It's wonderful. It is. It's been one of the most fun experiences ever. It wasn't something that I ever intended on doing, but one of my best friends, Elena, we've been best friends since we were 4, and she was getting married, and she and her husband asked me to officiate. And so I went through the process of becoming ordained, thinking I would just do it for her. But then more and more opportunities came up, and I think, oh, she's watching. That's her. I think it's also something that's maybe easier for teachers when you're used to being in front of, a group of students who may not always respond to what you planned, and you have to like turn on a dime and read the room. It lends itself to the same thing that happens when you're officiating. And it's something that I definitely would love to continue to do. It was something I planned on doing as like a little side business pre-COVID. But then when COVID struck, it just, it made me a little nervous. I've done a few COVID weddings though, and they were very intimate, but very beautiful, and I think that's another thing. Like no matter what is happening in this world, you always find some sort of blessing. And my best friend's wedding had a lot of people. It was beautiful. And then the weddings I've officiated during COVID have been so much smaller, but it's like the love and the joy is still there. And it's really exciting to just get to be there on that day for people, and to realize that, it really doesn't matter how many people are there or where you are. It's about the commitment to one another. And I feel really honored that anyone would ever, invite me to be a part of that day.
Cool. Can you talk about your spiritual practices? I gotta take a break for a minute. I'll be right back. Just start talking about what your top 3 spiritual practices are. I'll be right back.
Sure. So I already talked about laughter and joy. I'd say another one for me is practicing non-judgment. There are pluses and minuses of having friends for many, many years. And I think my friends who have known me forever know what judgmental Quinn looks like. And I hope they now know what non-judgmental Quinn looks like. And I think a lot of times we talk about empathy but we don't always talk about it in the right way. You don't need to be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to not pass judgment on them. We all have our own unique experiences, and no matter how poorly we might think someone is behaving, or conversely, when we see someone, we're like, oh, I wish I could be like them. You don't know what their path was. You don't know what they are sitting with. And it has just been so helpful to reserve that judgment, because I've learned that as I stop judging other people, I also stop judging myself. And if you're ever going to be in a place to truly give and receive love, or to be at peace, you cannot be sitting in a place of judgment all the time. And so just being really conscious about what I'm feeling when someone says something that triggers me, and like being able to, in that moment, step back and just say, I don't know where that's coming from for them, and leave it at that. And I think along with practicing non-judgment comes the practice of like letting go and releasing things. And you know, I used to love that show Hoarders, and it was so cathartic to watch like all of the material things go and see the space freed up. But I think about that so much on an emotional level now. I think that's part of what makes dating fun for me now, being clear on like what I want and what I need, and knowing that I don't have to save anyone. I don't have to fix anyone. And it's actually really arrogant to think like, oh, this man, he needs me, I can make him better. Like, no, you know, you have to let people go and go on their own path. And I think the same is true. And like you talked about this, like with our generation, with the 80s babies, and everything revolving around success and like your accomplishments. And there are goals that I have set for myself that I realize no longer serve me. Like, that's not my goal anymore. And it's okay to let that go, even if I don't have another goal to replace it, because it's not all about that. It's about me figuring out myself and what is going to work for me and serve me in the long run. And I think being the type A person I am, that has been really, really hard. And that is something that I think I spend more time focusing on as a practice. Just saying like, it's okay. Like, I know you wanted to get here, and you may still get here, but getting here may look like this and not like this. Or maybe you don't want to get here anymore. Maybe you want to get over there. Now, what does that look like? And not being anxious about it, and looking at it as like, now I get to have this new journey. I get to experience new things.
What comes up for me is I want to teach you guys grace and ease, right? Because, and not to say that I did it like that, because I ran up on it my whole life, right? So, but now that I'm at this great age, right? And what I'd like to give back is doesn't take all that running up on it, right? It does not take all of the energy that we exert in everything that we do. It's really about that being thing. It's who do you get to be to have what you want? And the sooner you learn the whole be, do, have, right? The whole who do I get to be?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Right.
That's such a huge part of momentum for me, like the get to versus have to. Like, I get to be this person now. I get to be in this experience, as opposed to looking at everything as like a burden because it didn't look the way I had originally envisioned it.
Exactly. And I could tell you, being so much older, I have a daughter your age.
But you look fabulous.
That it all works together. It all works together. When you look on it, when you look back, you say, oh, I had this plan. I thought it was going to look like this, but it's looking like this. I would say enjoy the journey. You know, you get on the roll and you're on the plan and you're going for the plan and you're just not enjoying yourself, right? It's all about that plan. It's all about, I got to get here. I got to get there. Slow it down. Grace and ease. Enjoy it. I love present moment experiences. Be present, because we could just move, and not be present to our lives at all. And then look, a whole year passed. I was like, damn, it's been a whole year already. when you look back, I look back on some things 5 years already, right? And Facebook it throws you right in your face, right? Because
I don't have those memories because I don't like that. I'm like, I don't want it popping up and reminding me what I thought was happening that ain't happening right now.
I swear it throws it right in your face, right? The memories of times that have passed, right? It's like, who would have thought a year already we did this whole COVID thing, and here we are, we're coming out of it and we're trying to navigate, right? Because I'm not ready to take my mask off yet, right? And I was vaccinated, and it's so much mixed information, I would say, that I'd rather err on the safe side, right? than on the other side. So I would say I'm wearing my mask, right? Mostly, right?
They have so many cute ones. You can make it a fat.
Nice, and they match, right? But we were in South Carolina last week, and when you go places, they're not wearing the mask down there. I have my mask on because I'm still just not that comfortable, and I've been going out. But wear the damn mask. What's wrong with that, right? Until we can figure this out, right? That's how I feel. And I also recognize that each person has a choice. You get to do whatever you want to do. You want to wear the mask, you don't have to wear the mask, right? I mean, but just don't come around me, right? No, I have this new joke that I have to develop where I have a portable thermometer, right? And before I take my mask off, I'm gonna have to pop you. And then you can be around me, right? And then I'll be okay. But I respect your choice, right? Choose whatever you want, right? Yeah. But so it's just been a really interesting time with all the information we're receiving, and then having to look at all of it and make a decision that works for you. Each one of us gets to make our own decision. Each one of us gets to choose what works for us. And I love that whole non-judgment, because we are judgment machines. We judge every single thing all the time. So that's a heavy practice, right? A heavy practice to work with non-judgment, because that's just what we do. We judge everything, right? So I love that. I love all of yours: laughter, non-judgment, and letting go, right? All of those are spiritual practices. People sometimes think about just meditation and praying and all that. But as we open up and we expand about, well, what really does support me? It may not be praying that really supports me when I'm down and out. I love affirmations. So affirmations support me all the time. And they just run around in my head, right? I learned them and I'll stick to them. And I would say, I was challenged myself talking about spiritual practices, the whole spiritual toolkit. And I was challenged doing COVID myself. So I had to really dig in and really dig into the practices that could support me throughout this whole time. So when I come and I bring different people like you, it's been really great talking about what has supported you through this time. What things do we use, right, to bring that joy?
And I think remembering to be open to different things. Like when I first started exploring spirituality, a lot of people were like, you should meditate, you should meditate, you should meditate. And I tried to do it on my own. I always share with my students and families, I'm a person with ADHD. So trying to be still and meditate was just incredibly difficult for me. But I knew somewhere there was something in it that was beneficial. And then I started doing guided meditations. And I'm like, okay, this actually is really helpful for me. And I do guided meditations before I go to bed. And they really support me and going to sleep with a peaceful mind and waking up optimistic. But if I had just tried it and said, well, my ADHD brain isn't going to let me do this and thrown it out the window, then, I would have had one less tool in my toolkit. And by like exploring different ways that things can look. You know, I found a lot of practices that support me. And so I just encourage people to be open. And if you try something one way and it feels like there's something there, but that thing isn't it, explore and see what you find.
Right. And that's why I like talking about all the different practices that each person we all use different things. Meditation works for me. I've been doing it for so many years that now I do it, right? But it's the consistency, because there are times if I stop doing it, then I got to start doing it again, right? You know, and when you stop, you stop. I'm talking about you really stop, right? And then you're like, oh, and then I always, if I stop, and then I'm like, oh, I just love meditating. And then when I go back, I was like, don't stop. You love this.
Yeah.
But
it's like working out, right?
Right. It's exactly like working out. Right. You stop. Once you stop, you got to really figure out how to start again. Right. And then you say, oh, I really love this. Why did I ever stop? And that's the same thing with the spiritual practices. And that's why I like in the toolkit, you have different ones, because at different times, something different may be working for you. I listened to Abraham Hicks every single day for a long time. Then lately, when COVID, my routine changed, because every morning I had a certain routine that I did. And then that routine totally changed. And then I didn't fit it in the same. And then I started slacking a bit. But every time in the morning, I go back and I listen right back there. And I was like, oh my God, I got to keep doing this, right? And so that's why I was saying today for me, consistency became really important, right? If you consistently practice it, it becomes a part of what you do. So that would be my thing about all the practices, just some consistent practice. And it doesn't have to be the same practice, but something that you can do consistently to support you is all the things in your spiritual toolkit, right? So we are almost out of time. What last thoughts, tips, anything you would like to leave the people with today?
I think it's spirituality and self-care, especially for Black women. My school leadership team is all Black women, and we are always at 100. Like this has to be perfect. This has to be right. Like people are watching us. Like like we can't make a mistake, and we don't take time for ourselves. And so, especially in the year that we've been in with so much loss and trauma, you cannot support anyone else unless you are supporting yourself. And I would just encourage everyone, but especially our sisters, to release the guilt that comes with putting yourself first. And take care of yourself, nurture your spirit. You'll be better for yourself, and you'll be better for the people that you want to support.
Great. Thank you, Quinn. It was great having you here tonight. And we'll get together for brunch soon.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
All right. You take care.
All right. Bye.
All right. Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight on Conversations with Rev G. I'm Rev G, and I'm here every Monday night from 8 to 9 p.m. on WEMS Radio Live. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube and the WEMS Radio app. I'd like to leave you today with one thought, and that is around self-care. Self-care is not selfish. Put yourself first. I am Rev G, and I'm here supporting you in living your best life in joy with grace and ease. And you can find me every day on Facebook, Reverend Quinn Jamisen, and on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. You have a great, great week and live your best life in joy.